When the Swan Alcoa Landcare project first started, I was a young man with dark hair. That was 20 years ago. And we talked about bringing a Landcare project into the metropolitan area. And Alcoa wanted to do that because we'd been working for a number of years in the wheat belt, in the Avon catchment, which is the headwaters of the Swan, with 6 farmer groups doing demonstration catchments on what could be achieved with a bit of funding and a lot of effort from people on the ground. And we'd also been working in the Peel Harvey with farmers doing the same sort of program, and it was time to really link the two, and the Swan was the missing piece.
Well, we refer to SALP at Perth NRM as one of our iconic programs. For us, you know, the on-ground outcomes, the working with the local governments, the corporate partnership, all of that is the kind of model that we're moving towards more of in the future as federal government tendering programs get more and more difficult.
The glue that holds it all together, of course, is the people with the projects. So none of this would have worked if we didn't have all of those urban landcare groups, all of those catchment groups, all of those small community groups that had projects that they wanted to work on. It was okay for us and our government partners to have the money, but we needed those people that were actually going to make the difference on the ground and who had the passion and the commitment to make that difference on the ground. And so 20 years of work really is not so much about the sponsors, but it's about the people that do the work. And we've got people involved in this project that have been there right from the very beginning, and like me, probably had dark hair at the start and now are elderly, and then we've got more young people that have come through that have been involved in their patch of dirt, their project, their wetland, their patch of bush, or their river foreshore, or whatever it was. They've been involved for 20 years.
Look, the SALP program has been really good. We've had tremendous follow-on from the community over the years. It's 20 years. It's amazing what has happened out there in Perth, across the metropolitan area because of the SALP program. The community groups have really embraced it, and in lots of ways SALP has embraced the community groups as well. If it didn't, I don't think we would have the movement of landcare groups out there in Perth. And the difference it makes is to give confidence to the community groups, A, to develop in the first place, and B, to care. It gives them a reason to make their projects work because they know that there's a guaranteed, almost a guaranteed, small sum of money coming on an annual basis maybe, or every 2 or 3 years. Whenever they apply for a bit of money, generally they get something.
There's a stat that says there's 176,000 volunteer hours that have gone into the Swan Alcoa Landcare project over the last 20 years, and you can roll that number off your tongue, 176,000 volunteer hours, but think about it. That's one person working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks of the year for 84 years. 84 years of effort. And when you look around the Perth metropolitan area and the Swan and Canning catchments, and even as far out as the Perth Hills and even up to Warraloo, where we used to take volunteers from Alcoa, there's been so much work done. So much change has happened over those 20 years. And unless you go out and see those projects like we do occasionally, and I've been fortunate to visit a lot of them and actually work on some of them. But the work that's gone in and the changes that have occurred are everlasting, they're enduring, and they'll be there for generations to come.
SALP has developed over the years with the community, by the community. The community members that go to those assessment meetings create next year's program. So any little glitches that occur in a program get ironed out. And believe me, they've been rather lively at times, some of those discussions, but at the end of the day, the difference is when you walk down on the ground and you see the difference on the ground because of those people, and you see the difference in those people who are working in a field that they love and care about. That's the genuine part of SALP, the connection to community.
It's always surprising how much volunteers can accomplish. Generally you think it's, late starts, long smokers, and they knock off early and go home for a cup of tea. But it's amazing how much they can actually do, because they've got the passion that comes with being a local. They've got a lot of local knowledge that they're willing to share with us when we come in as contractors. They can tell us stories about the site, fill us in on the history that often contractors don't get to experience. We just come in, do a job and leave. But when you're involved with the locals, you get so much more of a three-dimensional view of what the site is and what it can be.
The Friends of the Spectacles was formed in 2008 after the bushfires of 2007, which really blackened the whole area. When we started, none of us knew anything, and from there we have grown from about 3 or 4 people into a group of 14 people, and sometimes on planting days we can get up to 40 people here. The Spectacles is 360 hectares, so it's nearly as big, or perhaps a little bit bigger, than Kings Park. So we've got a lot of area to work in here, because in the 1920s to the 1990s it was farmland, so there are lots of vacant spaces. At the moment we're working in the northwest corner of the Spectacles, where we have been planting there for nearly 10 years.
What's really exciting about SALP is the longevity of the program, and what we're seeing now is not just individual projects achieve success, but those projects connecting up with other SALP projects or protected areas throughout the catchment, and really providing some important corridors of health for our waterways. And that's really important when it comes to managing the river, because having a healthy catchment and looking after it will prevent problems in the waterway, which are often much more difficult and more expensive to be able to solve.
We're Armidale Gosnells Landcare Group. We work across both local government regions, Armidale and Gosnells, and that is, we really do look after the upper catchment, so the upper middle Canning area. That part of the river is really important to our groups, and it really is the lifeblood of the communities here. These funds help us bring community together. We're creating nature corridors and natural pathways here, and it helps build habitat for native wildlife, and we're also replacing weeds with native plants that are stripping out nutrients from our waterways, so we're essentially helping clean up the waterways as well.
In 2012 I started up the Friends group here. I met up with people who were walking their dogs, and I got talking to them, and I asked them if they would be interested in doing some re-veg work here in the park. So we started off then in a small way in this section through here. It was full of woody weeds like Acacia longifolia, Flinders Range wattles and whatnot. So we hand cut, hand sawed them out, and this is the result. We've got a lot of re-veg, we've put in plants here, and I think this is really satisfying to see what's happened.
So Bannister Creek's been my sole, really heartful project that got me involved in the first place, and bringing that up and working with all of the stakeholders to create the idea of transforming a drain into a living stream back in 1998 was, it was like a dream. It really was. It was just, if you don't have dreams, you don't get anywhere. And we created this vision of what the creek, what this drain could be in the future, with the community and with all the stakeholders, including the Aboriginal people.
The benefits for our children are huge. Being able to connect them with nature is a really big part of how we do business here at Sawyers Valley. So we have an opportunity once or twice a year to engage the children in what we call sustainable clubs. All classes are outside of the classroom. We're engaged in nature, we're out looking for birds. We're down here in the wetland dipping for macroinvertebrates. We are doing things like bike club, where we're riding along the trail. The opportunities for students is immense in terms of being able to see the weed eradication and what a difference it's made to this site, and then to be engaged in planting native species and watching those native species grow. We're lucky enough to have 8 species of frogs, which include burrowing frogs and tree frogs, and we're just incredibly lucky to have such an incredible site so close to our school.
The reason we're doing this planting is to make the place a better place for animals, to bring the birds back and make it so much more scenic for the visitors that come to the park that use the walkways here.
We see lots of birds in here. There's about 60 species of birds. The black cockatoos, that's grey glass there. They fly through here, they forage. You see lots of where they've had lots of their parties there, while the gum nuts on the ground. There's quendas coming back into the park. In fact, this morning we've just discovered a quenda digging, which is really exciting. And there's some antechinus in here as well. Also, if you come here really early in the morning, you see the kangaroos. They have corridors through here, so that's really nice to see.
Without the SALP funding, we wouldn't be where we are today, really. Because with the funding, we've used it for different things, but we can get people in to spray the weeds, and really some of those weeds, that's the only thing you can do. We've got a marvellous guy who knows, he knows what's native, he knows the different weeds and the correct herbicide to use for each one. And so we've been able to get him to help us control the weeds. And then we can plant and we'll get somewhere. So SALP have been, you know, a godsend to us. It would have been, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's, you know, it's really helped.
Working with people who care about the environment and actually want to improve our local bushland. It's disappearing quite quickly, believe it or not, and so this is an opportunity to work with people who are keen to retain it. And I think working in this park, we see lots of other people using this park. There's cyclists, there's walkers, and there's lots of dog walkers. And so you get to say, hello, how are you, what have you. And I think that's really good, that you can communicate with people. And they quite often say, oh, you're doing a good job, like to come and help, but... But anyway, it's nice that they actually notice what we're doing, and I think having a small group, you actually get to know each other quite well. So if something happens, you've got that caring aspect of it as well. And we do look after each other when we're out in the bush, and I think that's a really important thing.
We have got now 20,000 to 30,000 people now living around this area, and they all need to go somewhere. Kings Park's a long way away, so this is the new Kings Park. You know, we can walk across the road and enjoy the wildflowers and that, and walk safely on tracks without fear of walking on a snake and any other thing that people might be scared of, and enjoy the wetland and just getting to go home and support it. But also, it could be also education for local schools and coming here. But we hope at the time that schools will get to be a bit more appreciative of these sort of bushland areas.
Yeah, I get a lot of benefits out of it. All the time I'm physically able to do it, I will. But the time will come when you can't manage it anymore, and then I'll just sit at the side and shout at everybody.
All of us in the group do it because we love the bush, and so we get that pleasure out of seeing it transformed, after seeing it looking better all the time. And we all think alike. We gel. It's almost like family. We gel together. When anything comes up, we discuss it and come to an agreement. There's no one person boss or anything. It's just all of us, one heart, because we love the bush.
But we get young families, and it's nice to see the children involved, and you know, mum and dad teaching them how to plant things. And no, it's really good, and I think they feel a bit of ownership, you know, if they get involved. But unfortunately, people have other things to do, weekends, and you know, it is usually pretty hard to drum up some help. So we're always happy to have new volunteers.
You can notice a lot more people with young families and dog walkers coming through here now that there's a good understory and that there's a lot of canopy here. You get a lot more shade, so people are using this area quite a lot more. Previously, it was a little bit barren, just a little bit dry, and it wasn't quite as welcoming. But yeah, over the course of a couple of years, you know, you find that it gets a lot more people out and about in the community when you've got native pockets like this that they can really enjoy.
We do need volunteers, more volunteers. Not necessarily younger people, because it's amazing what older people can do, but we need more numbers. I was thinking walking down here, if we had more people on a Saturday morning for 1 hour, we could achieve a lot more, and we'd really like to do that.
And while it's great to be here today and celebrating and recognising the achievements over the past 20 years, it's also a logical point to actually start the talk and look to the future. We need to inspire the next generation of people to take on the work that the current volunteers have done, so that these projects not only can continue, but we can make this program a bigger and better one as we look in the years to come.